Nathan Cole had lived on the same stretch of land for as long as he could remember. His grandfather had built the house, his father had maintained it, and now it was his to protect. The land itself was more than just soil and trees. It was a legacy. It held the freshwater spring that had sustained his family for generations, feeding into a pond that shimmered under the sun. It was the kind of place that carried history in its roots. Then the HOA came. Crestwood had once been a modest town with open fields and quiet roads, but developers had changed all that. One by one, uniform houses popped up like weeds, each neatly tucked behind identical white fences. With them came the Homeowners Association, a governing body that dictated everything from lawn height to mailbox color. Nathan had no interest in their rules. His land sat just outside their jurisdiction, or so he had thought. The first sign of trouble came in the form of a letter. Dear Mr. Cole, the Crestwood Homeowners Association is launching a community-wide sustainability initiative to enhance the well-being of all residents. As part of this project, the Crestwood Hydroelectric Initiative will redirect excess water resources to power HOA homes. Your cooperation in this endeavor is expected and appreciated. Nathan read the words twice. His cooperation was expected? He crumpled the letter and tossed it aside. They had no right to his water. 2 weeks later, the bulldozers arrived. Nathan was tending to his vegetable garden when he heard the deep rumble of machinery. He wiped his hands on his jeans and strode toward the noise, his pulse steady but tight. At the edge of his property, workers in orange vests were already digging, unearthing the land that had been in his family for generations. What the hell do you think you're doing? Nathan's voice carried over the hum of equipment. A man turned, clipboard in hand. Mr. Cole? We're laying the pipeline for the hydro project. Nathan's jaw tightened. This is my land. Before the worker could respond, a sleek black car pulled up and out stepped Evelyn Sharp. Nathan had seen her around town, always in tailored blazers, always watching over Crestwood like she owned it. Mr. Cole, she greeted, her voice smooth, practiced. I was hoping we could have this conversation in a more formal setting. We don't need a conversation. We need you off my property. Evelyn sighed, shaking her head as if he were a child throwing a tantrum. I understand your attachment to this place, truly. But let me be clear, under municipal expansion guidelines, your land now falls within Crestwood's jurisdiction. The HOA has a legal right to use this water for community benefit. Nathan folded his arms. You can't just take what doesn't belong to you. She gave a tight-lipped smile. We're not taking anything. We're redistributing. You'll still have access to your well and personal supply, but the larger body of water, she gestured toward his pond, now marked with surveyor flags, is now a shared resource. Nathan took a step closer, his voice lowering. You're stealing my land's lifeblood. You do this, and you'll regret it. Evelyn's expression never wavered. Mr. Cole, the HOA values cooperation. We don't want hostility. But if you resist, legal action will be taken. Let's not make this difficult. She didn't wait for a reply. With a nod to the workers, she turned on her heel and walked back to her car. The roar of machinery resumed, and within minutes, the digging continued. Nathan stood frozen, fists clenched at his sides. By the end of the week, the pipes were in place. His spring-fed pond was drained, its water redirected beneath the earth, vanishing into the network of Crestwood's new hydroelectric system. Nathan had lost. For now. Nathan had always known the land like the back of his hand. He could tell when rain was coming just by the way the wind shifted. He knew which patches of earth held the richest soil and which trees bore the sweetest fruit. But now, standing at the edge of his property, he barely recognized it. The pond was gone. The once vibrant waters that had fed his land for generations had been siphoned away, forced into thick industrial pipes that disappeared beneath Crestwood's pristine streets. The banks had cracked, the mud turning to dust in the afternoon sun. Without the water, his crops struggled, and his livestock wandered restlessly, sensing the change. The HOA had called it progress. Nathan called it theft. For weeks, he watched Crestwood flourish, while his land withered. The HOA's hydroelectric project had been a resounding success, at least for those who benefited. The community's energy costs dropped, but the homeowners weren't seeing the savings. Instead, the HOA had imposed new fees for water access, claiming it was necessary for maintenance and sustainable resource management. Nathan had seen the headlines. Crestwood HOA leads green energy revolution. Board President Evelyn Sharp praised for environmental leadership. Meanwhile, his land, a land that had survived 3 generations of storms, droughts, and hardships, was being strangled. One morning, he decided he'd had enough. Nathan drove into town, pushing open the doors of the Crestwood HOA office. The lobby smelled of fresh paint and expensive furniture, the kind of place built with money squeezed from homeowners who had no choice but to pay. At the front desk, a young woman barely looked up from her computer. "I need to speak with Evelyn Sharp," Nathan said, his voice even but firm. "Do you have an appointment?"
"No," she sighed.
"She's very busy. I can schedule you for next month." Nathan exhaled sharply. "I'm not leaving until I talk to her." Perhaps it was something in his tone, or maybe just the way he stood, tall, unmoving. Either way, after a long moment, the woman sighed and pressed a button on her desk phone. A few minutes later, Nathan found himself in Evelyn's office. She looked up from a stack of documents, her expression unreadable. "Mr. Cole," she said smoothly. "What can I do for you?" Nathan pulled a chair back but didn't sit. "You can give me back my water." Evelyn sighed, as if she had been expecting this. "Nathan, we've been over this. The hydro project is a community asset. I understand that you're upset." "You don't understand," he interrupted, his voice sharper now. "My land is dying. My livestock are suffering. The pond's gone dry." Evelyn leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms. "I appreciate your concerns, but this is bigger than just you. The entire neighborhood benefits from the project. Homes have lower energy costs. The community is thriving." "No," Nathan cut in. "You're thriving. The HOA's collecting fees for water that you stole." Evelyn's lips curled in a smile, but there was no warmth in it. "That's a strong accusation." Nathan leaned forward, planting his hands on her desk. "It's not an accusation. It's a fact. And if you don't shut that pipeline down, I'll make sure every homeowner in Crestwood knows what's really happening here." She didn't flinch. Instead, she tapped a manicured finger against a stack of papers. "Nathan," she said almost gently, "if you take this any further, I will bury you in legal action. Do you really want to spend the next few years in court, draining every penny you have just to fight a battle you won't win?" Nathan clenched his teeth. He had known this wouldn't be easy, but hearing the casual arrogance in her voice, made his blood boil. Evelyn continued, her voice cool and measured. "If you cooperate, I might be willing to offer some compensation. A small stipend, perhaps, for the inconvenience. But if you insist on fighting us, well, let's just say the HOA has a very effective legal team." Nathan stared at her, his jaw tight. He had walked into this office hoping for a resolution, but there was none to be found here. Evelyn Sharp wasn't interested in fairness. She was interested in power. Nathan straightened. "Enjoy your stolen water," he said, turning for the door. Evelyn's voice followed him. "I hope you reconsider, Nathan. This is the best offer you're going to get." Nathan didn't respond, because now he knew exactly what he had to do. Nathan had never been a man of reckless action. He believed in patience, in letting the land teach its lessons over time. But the HOA had taken what was his, and Evelyn Sharp had made it clear. There would be no compromise, no justice, only submission. He wasn't the kind of man to submit. For weeks, he studied the HOA's hydroelectric system, watching as their precious pipes carried his water beneath the town, feeding Crestwood's neatly manicured lawns and pristine homes. The HOA had designed an efficient network, one that relied on perfect balance, just enough water to generate power, not enough to overwhelm the infrastructure. That was their mistake, because Nathan still controlled where the water started. Spring arrived, bringing with it the annual thaw. The snows in the distant hills melted, feeding underground reserves and swelling the streams. Nathan had seen it every year of his life, His land always welcomed the change, the water finding its way through natural channels. But this year, he would decide where that water went. In the dead of night, he set to work. Using the excavation rig his grandfather had left behind, he unearthed the main intake valve the HOA had installed on his property. It had been buried deep, meant to remain undisturbed, but nothing on his land was beyond his reach. With calculated precision, he rerouted the diverted water back to its original course, straight toward the HOA's underground pipelines. But he didn't stop there. Nathan knew the limits of their system, the pressure thresholds that had to remain stable. He manipulated the flow, ensuring that just enough extra water surged through to test the pipes, but not enough to trigger immediate alarms. It had to build slowly, unnoticed, until it was too late. Then he waited. The first signs appeared by morning, minor flooding in Crestwood's lower neighborhoods. Homeowners stepped onto their porches to find puddles forming in their yards. Basement sump pumps hummed to life. The HOA dismissed it as a seasonal fluctuation, nothing to worry about. By noon, the trickles became torrents. The neatly paved streets turned into sluggish rivers. Lawns became marshlands. The lower-tier homes, the ones that had paid the highest HOA fees for their premium access to the hydroelectric grid, began reporting structural damage. And still, the water kept coming. Nathan sat on his porch, sipping his coffee, watching from a distance as the chaos unfolded. Crestwood's HOA board scrambled to respond, but they had no contingency plan for too much water. Their system had been designed with greed, not resilience. By late afternoon, emergency alerts blared across town. Severe flooding in Crestwood. Residents advised to evacuate. Nathan watched as Evelyn Sharp arrived on site, her expression tight, with barely concealed panic. She waded through knee-high water in her tailored pantsuit, barking orders at HOA officials. But there was nothing they could do. The flood had already won. Nathan stood, stretching as he took in the scene. The homes that had drained his land were now sinking beneath the weight of their own excess. The town that had stolen his water was drowning in it. And he had never seen his land so alive. The once dry pond was full again, the natural flow restored. His crops, though battered, drank deeply. The trees stood strong, their roots fed by the water that had always belonged here. As the sun dipped behind the hills, casting long shadows over the flooded streets of Crestwood, Nathan allowed himself a small, satisfied smile. The land had taught its lesson, and Evelyn Sharp was finally learning. By morning, Crestwood was unrecognizable. The once pristine neighborhood, so carefully manicured, so obsessively controlled, had become a swamp. Streets had turned to waterways, basements had become cisterns, and homes that once stood firm on their HOA-approved foundations now listed precariously in standing water. The homeowners were furious. Not just because their property was damaged, but because the HOA had failed them. Nathan watched from his dry patch of land as residents confronted HOA board members in the flooded streets. Voices carried over the water, sharp with accusation. "You told us this system was safe. Where's all this water coming from? My house is ruined, Evelyn. We pay you thousands a year for what this?" Evelyn Sharp stood in the middle of it all, her tailored blazer soaked, her perfectly curated image shattered. For the first time, there was no smooth condescension, no carefully worded dismissal. She looked around at the angry faces closing in on her, at the rising waters lapping at the very foundation of Crestwood, and for the first time in her life, she had no answer. That was when the town inspector arrived. Nathan saw the official step out of his truck, a thick file in hand, and marched straight toward the HOA's makeshift crisis center. The confrontation was brief, but it was devastating. The inspector waved the file at Evelyn as he spoke, his voice carrying over the chaos. The hydro project was never properly permitted. Evelyn's face went pale. The HOA bypassed county environmental assessments. You ignored warnings about water displacement. And now, thanks to your negligence, this entire neighborhood is under 6 feet of floodwater. Homeowners turned to Evelyn, eyes narrowing with fresh outrage. You mean this never should have happened? someone shouted. You lied to us? Another voice accused. Evelyn opened her mouth, searching for a defense, but nothing came. Because there was no defense. Nathan almost felt sorry for her. Almost. He turned away from the scene, heading back toward his house. He had no desire to stick around for the inevitable fallout. The lawsuits, the resignations, the collapse of the HOA's iron grip. It was all coming, and he had no doubt Evelyn Sharp would be buried under it. As he stepped onto his porch, he let out a slow breath, gazing at his land. The pond had returned, shimmering in the morning light. The trees, long denied their rightful water, stood taller than ever. His land had endured. It had fought back.
And it had won.
Nathan had spent his life believing in the natural order of things. That people who took too much, who upset the balance, would eventually face the consequences. He had never expected to be the hand that delivered those consequences, but as he looked out at Crestwood, at the floodwaters that would take months to clear, he realized something. Some lessons needed a stronger teacher. And sometimes, the land spoke loudest when it took back what was its own.